The dust billowed around Katherine Sinclair's boots as she pushed herself to keep running, her lungs burning with each desperate breath. Blood trickled down her arm where a bullet had grazed her, but the pain was nothing compared to the fear of being caught by the men who'd been hunting her for 3 days straight across the Texas plains. The year was 1873, and in the unforgiving wilderness of the American frontier, a woman alone had few allies and even fewer chances of survival. Katherine stumbled over a ridge, clutching the leather satchel that contained everything she had left in the world. Her blonde hair had come loose from its pins, whipping wildly around her face in the hot summer wind. Behind her, she could hear the distant sound of hoofbeats. The bounty hunters were closing in. Just when her legs threatened to give out, she spotted it in the distance. A small ranch nestled in a valley, smoke rising peacefully from its chimney. Her last hope. With renewed determination, Katherine forced herself forward, praying that whoever lived there would show mercy to a stranger in need. Noah Anderson was brushing down his sorrel stallion when he spotted the figure running toward his property. He squinted against the setting sun, his hand instinctively moving to the Colt revolver holstered at his hip. Strangers in this part of Texas were rarely good news, especially ones who appeared to be running from something. As the figure drew closer, Noah realized it was a woman bloodied, exhausted, and clearly terrified. His eyes scanned the horizon behind her, catching sight of a dust cloud that could only be riders approaching fast. Katherine collapsed against his fence, her eyes wild with fear. "Please," she gasped, clutching at his shirt sleeve. "They'll kill me. I've done nothing wrong, I swear it." Noah didn't hesitate. Something in her desperate blue eyes told him she was speaking the truth. "Get in the barn," he commanded, his voice low and urgent. "Behind the hay bales in the back stall." Katherine nodded gratefully and stumbled toward the weathered structure. Noah watched her disappear inside before turning his attention back to the approaching riders. 3 men, heavily armed and riding hard. Bounty hunters by the look of them. Noah had encountered their kind before during his years driving cattle across the plains. Men who cared more for payment than justice. The leader of the group reined in his black stallion sharply, sending dirt flying. A scar ran down his cheek, disappearing into a grizzled beard. "Afternoon, mister," he called, his voice deceptively friendly. "Name's Jackson. My associates and I are tracking a fugitive, a woman, blonde, slender, probably injured. Seen anyone fitting that description?" Noah continued brushing his horse, his expression neutral. "Can't say that I have. What's she wanted for?" "Murder," Jackson replied flatly. "Killed her husband in cold blood back in St. Louis. There's a $500 reward for her capture." Noah's hand paused momentarily on his horse's flank. $500 was more money than most folks in these parts would see in a year, but something told him there was more to this story than what these men were letting on. "Haven't seen any women out here in weeks," Noah replied evenly, setting down his brush. "Just me and my horses." The man to Jackson's right, a thin, rat-faced individual with yellowed teeth pointed toward the ground. "Those look like fresh tracks to me, small ones like a woman might leave." Jackson's eyes narrowed. "Mind if we take a look around your property, mister?" "Anderson, Noah Anderson," he replied, stepping forward. His hand rested casually near his holster. "And yes, I do mind. This is my land and you have no authority here." The third bounty hunter, a bulky man with dead eyes, spat tobacco juice onto the ground. "We've got authorization from the marshal in Fort Worth to apprehend this fugitive by any means necessary." "Then take it up with the marshal," Noah said firmly. "But you'll not be searching my property without his presence." Jackson leaned forward in his saddle. "I don't think you understand the situation, Anderson. That woman is a murderess and a thief. Harboring a fugitive is a crime." "And trespassing is a crime too," Noah replied, his hand now openly resting on his revolver. "If she's here, which I'm not saying she is, you'll have to go through me to get to her." The tension crackled between them like lightning before a storm. Noah stood his ground, counting the seconds, measuring the distance to cover if bullets started flying. After a long moment, Jackson straightened in his saddle. "We'll be back, Anderson, with the marshal." His eyes scanned the property one last time. "Don't go anywhere." Noah didn't move until the three riders disappeared over the horizon. Only then did he allow his shoulders to relax slightly before heading toward the barn. Katherine was huddled behind the hay bales, just where he'd told her to hide. When he approached, she flinched, her eyes wide with fear. "They're gone," Noah said quietly. For now, relief washed over her face, followed quickly by wariness. "Why did you help me?" Noah pulled up a wooden crate and sat down, giving her space. Those men didn't have the look of justice about them. "I've seen enough bounty hunters to know the difference between those chasing payment and those upholding the law." He studied her face. "Though they seem convinced you killed someone." Katherine's hands twisted in her lap. "My husband," she whispered, "but I didn't kill him." He was shot by his business partner, Thomas Reed. Thomas was embezzling money from their shipping company when my husband confronted him. She closed her eyes, pain etched across her features. "Reed killed him and framed me for it. The local sheriff is his cousin. I never stood a chance at a fair trial, so I ran." Noah was silent for a moment, weighing her words. "You have proof," Katherine nodded, patting the leather satchel at her side. "Ledgers. My husband kept duplicates of everything. I took them before I fled. They show the money Reed was stealing." "Why Fort Worth? Why come all this way?" "There's a federal marshal here, Marshal James Wilson. He worked with my father years ago. I thought he might help me clear my name." Her shoulders slumped. "But Reed's men found me before I could reach him." Noah stood, his decision made. "You'll stay here tonight. Tomorrow I'll ride into Fort Worth and find this marshal. If your story checks out, we'll figure out what to do next." Katherine's eyes filled with tears. "Why would you risk yourself for a stranger?" Noah thought about it for a moment. "My pa always said a person's character is judged by what they do when no one's watching. I'm not about to turn a desperate woman over to men like that without knowing the truth." That night, Katherine slept in Noah's bed while he took the floor by the fireplace. Despite her exhaustion, she found sleep elusive, her mind racing with thoughts of the danger she'd brought to this stranger's door. Noah, too, remained awake, listening to the night sounds beyond his cabin walls, his revolver close at hand. He'd known many women during his 30 years working as a trail boss, meant passing through countless towns with saloons and dance halls, but something about Katherine Sinclair stirred feelings. He thought long buried after losing his fiancée to typhoid fever 5 years earlier. Morning brought with it a sense of uneasy calm. Noah made coffee and a simple breakfast of biscuits and bacon while Katherine cleaned and bandaged her wound properly. "I can't thank you enough," she said, watching as he packed supplies into his saddlebags. "If those men had caught me—" "Don't think about that now," Noah interrupted gently. "Stay inside, keep the doors locked. I'll be back by nightfall, hopefully with the marshal." As Noah mounted his horse, he caught sight of Katherine standing in the doorway, sunlight turning her hair to gold. For a moment, he allowed himself to acknowledge the strange protectiveness he felt toward her, a woman he'd known less than a day. Fort Worth was bustling with activity when Noah arrived. The cattle drives had brought prosperity to what had once been a simple military outpost, and now the streets teemed with cowboys, merchants, and travelers of all kinds. Noah made his way to the marshal's office, his eyes constantly scanning for any sign of the bounty hunters. Marshal James Wilson was an imposing figure, despite his advancing years, tall and broad-shouldered with a silver mustache that contrasted sharply with his weather-beaten face. He listened carefully as Noah recounted his encounter with Katherine and the men pursuing her. "Katherine Sinclair," Wilson mused, leaning back in his chair. "Robert Sinclair's daughter. I knew her father well, an honorable man." He sighed heavily. "I've heard something about this case. The St. Louis newspapers carried the story a few weeks back. It seemed suspicious even then." "So you believe she's innocent?" Noah pressed. Wilson rubbed his chin thoughtfully. "I've known enough guilty folks to recognize when a story doesn't add up. If she has evidence against this Reed fellow, I'd certainly like to see it." He stood up, strapping on his gun belt. "Let's go meet this young woman of yours." "She's not mine," Noah began, then stopped himself. "We should leave now. Those bounty hunters threaten to return." As they rode back toward Noah's ranch, a sense of unease settled over him. The road seemed too quiet, the afternoon too still. When they crested the final hill overlooking his property, Noah's heart sank. Smoke was rising from his barn. "No," he whispered, spurring his horse forward. The bounty hunters had returned just as they'd promised. The barn was engulfed in flames, and Noah's cabin door hung splintered from its hinges. Fear gripped him as he jumped from his horse and ran toward the house, gun drawn. "Katherine," he shouted, searching each room frantically. A weak cough drew his attention to the floor beside the overturned table. Katherine lay there, blood trickling from a cut on her forehead, but alive. "They came back," she gasped as Noah knelt beside her. "I hid when I heard them approaching, but they searched everywhere. When they couldn't find me, they set the barn on fire, hoping to draw me out." Marshal Wilson appeared in the doorway, his own weapon drawn. "We need to move," he said grimly. "They can't have gone far." Noah helped Katherine to her feet, his arm supporting her waist. "Did they get the ledgers?" She shook her head. "Hidden under the floorboard, like you suggested." As they stepped outside, the crack of a rifle shot split the air. Marshal Wilson pushed them back inside as a bullet splintered the doorframe where Noah's head had been moments before. "They're in the tree line," Wilson muttered, peering cautiously out the window. "3 of them, all armed." "There's a trapdoor in the pantry," Noah said quickly. "Leads to a root cellar. My father built it as a shelter during Apache raids." Katherine retrieved her satchel of evidence while Noah and the marshal gathered ammunition and supplies. The 3 of them had just disappeared into the cellar when the bounty hunters entered the cabin, their heavy boots thundering overhead. The cellar was small and dark, lit only by the lantern Noah had hastily grabbed. They could hear the men above ransacking the cabin, overturning furniture in their search. "There's a tunnel," Noah whispered, pointing to a narrow passage at the back of the cellar. "Leads out to the creek bed." My pa believed in having more than one way out of a tight spot. For almost an hour they waited in tense silence, listening as the men above grew increasingly frustrated. Finally, the sound of boots receded, followed by the slam of the cabin door. "Wait here," Marshal Wilson instructed, carefully ascending the ladder to peek through the trapdoor. After a moment, he gestured for them to follow. The cabin was in shambles, furniture overturned, Noah's few possessions scattered across the floor. Through the window, they could see the barn still smoldering, though the flames had died down. "They'll be watching the road to town," Wilson said grimly. "We need to get to Fort Worth, but we'll have to take the long way around." Katherine looked at Noah, her eyes full of remorse. "I've brought nothing but trouble to your door, your home, your barn." Noah shook his head. "Buildings can be rebuilt." His hand found hers, squeezing gently. "You're still alive, that's what matters." The intensity in his gaze made Katherine's breath catch. Even in this moment of danger, she couldn't deny the connection forming between them, something neither of them had anticipated when she'd stumbled onto his property the day before. They traveled through the night, avoiding the main roads, Marshal Wilson leading them along creek beds and game trails. Katherine rode behind Noah on his horse, her arms wrapped around his waist, her cheek pressed against his back. Despite their precarious situation, she found herself drawing comfort from his solid presence. By dawn, they reached Fort Worth, slipping into town from the south rather than taking the main road. Wilson led them to a modest house on the outskirts. "My sister's place," he explained as a gray-haired woman opened the door. "Martha, we need sanctuary." Martha Wilson didn't ask questions, merely nodded and ushered them inside. While she prepared food, Katherine laid out the ledgers for Marshal Wilson's inspection. The evidence was damning clear records of Thomas Reed's systematic theft from the company, along with notes in Katherine's husband's handwriting detailing his suspicions and plans to confront his partner. "This is enough to warrant an investigation," Wilson confirmed, closing the ledger. "I'll send a telegraph to the federal marshal in St. Louis immediately. In the meantime, you'll both stay here where it's safe." For 3 days, they remained at Martha's house, tension mounting as they waited for a response from St. Louis. Noah spent the hours helping repair Martha's roof and chopping firewood, while Katherine assisted with cooking and household tasks. In the evenings, they sat on the back porch, talking long into the night. Katherine learned that Noah had come to Texas after the war, buying his small ranch with money saved from years of driving cattle north to the railheads. He spoke of his dreams to breed horses, of the quiet life he'd built for himself after years of wandering. In turn, Noah discovered that Katherine had grown up in Boston, the daughter of a respected judge. She'd met her husband at a society function and married young, moving to St. Louis where he'd established his shipping business. "I cared for Edward," she admitted one evening, her voice soft in the gathering darkness. "But I can't say it was a great love. We were comfortable together, respected one another when he died." She paused, gathering her thoughts. "I mourned him truly. But I've realized since that what we had wasn't what I'd always hoped for in marriage." "And what had you hoped for?" Noah asked, his eyes intent on her face. Katherine smiled wistfully. "Passion, understanding, the feeling that someone knows your heart better than you do yourself." Her eyes met his. "Have you ever felt that?" Noah was silent for a long moment. "Once I thought I might. Elizabeth and I were to be married, but she fell ill before we could." His hand found Catherine's in the darkness. "Since then, I hadn't considered it possible again until recently." The weight of his words hung between them, full of possibility and unspoken feelings that had grown with surprising speed in the midst of their shared danger. On the fourth day, Marshal Wilson returned with news. The federal authorities in St. Louis had arrested Thomas Reed after examining the evidence Wilson had telegraphed to them. Reed had broken under questioning, confessing to the murder of Edward Sinclair. "You're a free woman, Katherine," Wilson announced. "The charges against you have been dropped. Reed will hang for murder and theft." Relief flooded through Katherine, but it was quickly tempered by uncertainty. With her name cleared, she could return to St. Louis, to her former life. Yet as she looked at Noah, she realized that prospect no longer held any appeal. That evening, Noah found Katherine sitting alone by Martha's garden, watching the sunset paint the Texas sky in brilliant oranges and reds. "What will you do now?" he asked, settling beside her on the bench. Katherine turned to face him. "I've been asking myself the same question. There's nothing for me in St. Louis anymore. My husband's business will be sold to settle his debts, our house along with it. You could go back to Boston, to your family," Noah suggested, though the words tasted bitter on his tongue. She shook her head. "I don't belong there anymore either." Her eyes met his, open and vulnerable. "The truth is, Noah Anderson, in these few days with you, I've felt more alive than I have in years, more myself." Noah's heart hammered in his chest as he took her hands in his. "My ranch isn't much, especially now with the barn gone. It's a hard life out here for anyone, let alone someone who grew up with the comforts you've known." "Are you trying to talk me out of staying?" Katherine asked, a smile playing at her lips. "No," Noah replied honestly. "I'm making sure you understand what you'd be choosing. I can offer you a home, Katherine, my protection, my loyalty, my heart if you want it, but I can't offer wealth or ease." Katherine leaned forward, pressing her lips gently to his. "I've had wealth and ease," she whispered against his mouth. "Now I want love, real love." Their kiss deepened, his arms encircling her waist as hers wound around his neck. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Noah rested his forehead against hers. "Stay with me," he said simply. "Not because you have nowhere else to go, but because you choose to." "I choose you," Katherine replied without hesitation. "I choose us." 2 days later, they rode out of Fort Worth with supplies purchased using money Marshal Wilson had advanced against the reward now being offered for Thomas Reed's capture. The bounty hunters had disappeared once word spread that their quarry was now officially innocent, presumably moving on to chase some other unfortunate soul. As they approached Noah's ranch, Katherine could see the charred remains of the barn, the damaged cabin. Yet rather than feeling dismay, she felt a surge of determination. This would be her home now, her fresh start. "It will take months of work to rebuild everything," Noah said apologetically as they dismounted. Katherine slipped her hand into his. "Then we'd better get started." Over the following weeks, they worked side by side from dawn until dusk. Noah taught Katherine how to repair the cabin's damaged walls, how to mix mortar and lay brick for the new chimney. Neighbors from miles around came to help raise the new barn, bringing food and supplies, curious to meet the woman who had captured the attention of the solitary rancher. By Christmas, the ranch had been transformed. The cabin was snug and secure against the winter cold, the new barn larger and stronger than the original. Inside, Katherine had created a home with simple furnishings and touches that reflected both her refined taste and their practical needs. On Christmas Eve, with snow falling softly outside, Noah knelt before Katherine in front of their fireplace and offered her a simple gold ring. "I've loved you since the moment you stood up to those bounty hunters for me," Katherine said through happy tears as he slipped the ring onto her finger. "When you said they'd have to go through you to get to me, I knew I'd found a man unlike any other." Noah kissed her deeply, then lifted her into his arms, carrying her to their bedroom. "I knew when I saw you running toward my ranch that my life was about to change forever," he murmured against her hair. "I just didn't realize how much better it would become." They were married on New Year's Day, 1874, in Fort Worth's small church, with Marshall Wilson giving away the bride and Martha serving as witness. The ceremony was simple, but the celebration afterward was joyful, with neighbors and townsfolk joining to wish them well. Spring brought new life to the ranch fields of wildflowers, newborn foals in the corral, and the first crops planted in the garden Katherine had established. Noah's dream of breeding quality horses began to take shape as word spread about his skill with even the most difficult animals. Katherine, too, found her place in their new community. Her education and literacy made her a valuable resource for neighbors needing letters written or contracts reviewed. Soon, she was teaching reading to several of the ranch children from nearby properties, holding lessons at their kitchen table 3 afternoons a week. In June, Marshall Wilson brought news that Thomas Reed had been hanged for his crimes. The substantial reward money was officially awarded to Katherine, though she insisted on sharing it with Wilson for his help in clearing her name. "What will you do with your portion?" Noah asked that night as they sat on their newly built porch, watching fireflies dance in the gathering darkness. Katherine smiled, taking his hand and placing it on her stomach. "I think we'll need to add a room to the cabin. For the baby." Noah's eyes widened, joy spreading across his face. "A baby, you're certain?" "Martha confirmed it yesterday," Katherine nodded, laughing as Noah swept her into his arms, spinning her around on the porch. "I never thought I could be this happy," he whispered, setting her down gently and cradling her face in his hands. "You've given me everything I never knew I wanted." "As have you," Katherine replied, stretching up to kiss him. A wanted woman finding her happy, ending with the cowboy brave enough to protect her. Their son, James Wilson Anderson, was born the following winter, a strong, healthy boy with his father's dark hair and his mother's blue eyes. 2 years later, they welcomed twin daughters, Elizabeth and Martha, completing their family. As the years passed, the Anderson ranch flourished. Noah's reputation as a horse breeder grew, bringing buyers from as far away as Kansas City and Denver. Katherine's small school expanded to a proper building constructed on their property, where she taught not only reading and writing but mathematics and history to the children of Fort Worth's outlying ranches. On the 10th anniversary of the day Katherine had stumbled onto Noah's property, they sat together on their porch swing, watching their children play in the yard as the Texas sunset painted the sky in brilliant hues. "Do you ever regret it?" Noah asked, his arm around her shoulders. "Giving up your life in the city for all this?" Katherine looked around at the thriving ranch, at their beautiful children, at the man who had risked everything to protect her when she was a stranger in need. "How could I regret finding the greatest love of my life? You saved me, Noah Anderson." He smiled, kissing her softly. "No, my love, we saved each other." As twilight deepened into night, they remained on the porch. Surrounded by the peaceful sounds of the home, they'd built together a home founded in courage, nurtured by determination, and sustained by a love that had begun in the most unexpected circumstances, when a desperate woman found safety in the arms of a cowboy who dared to stand between her and danger, changing both their destinies forever.